We'll give everybody a few seconds to jump in here, and we'll get started in about 30 seconds as we dive into managing the impossible this Monday, a topic that should definitely resonate with all of our managers out there. No matter how experienced you are, we always come against different constraints in the workforce. So we'll kick off in just about 30 seconds, like I mentioned. So in the meantime, just sit tight, and I'll go ahead and get us going in a little bit. Okay, so we're at the top of the hour. So let's get into it as people trickle in. So I'm excited today because we're kicking off our 5-week mini series on what to do when you're experiencing constraints. So right now in the world, there are economic constraints, there are political constraints, there's all sorts of constraints. And in the workforce, we're affected by everything. Right? We have to shift, we have to raise our awareness. And so leading when resources are tight is a different type of challenge. And so for that reason, we've designed this mini series to walk you through it. So let me get started by introducing myself and just sharing a little bit about Management Cues and myself. So hi, if you haven't met me before, I'm Dr. Mayra Austin. I am the CEO and founder of a company called Management Cues. And Management Cues is a training organization that trains and develops managers in a unique way. So we provide training and development and tools and a bunch of other ways of learning in the workforce. What makes us unique is that we've been scientifically tested and proven to work, and that we track performance in the training experience while managers are learning. And so that makes us a little bit different from other training organizations, from other trainers out there. And it really stems from my operational experience and my passion for understanding managers, what they experience, and what we can do different to optimize people in the workforce and move and grow and just be better and happier. Okay, so here we go. Let's get into session 1. So session 1 is going to focus on a reality check. So today we're going to focus on the reality check, reframing expectations without losing our mind, right? Without losing our sanity, because when we're put in a difficult position, or when we're giving it, or when we are being given really sophisticated goals, but the resources don't align with those goals, it calls for a different stretch from us. And so that's when things start to get a little challenging. That's also when we as managers and leaders start to rub our teams the wrong way, right? And that's when we start to experience things like burnout, turnover, conflict, employee complaints. I mean, we can go on and on. There's so many things that stem from how we're handling the situation and where our energy is being spread throughout our team. So today, we're going to cover on not being alone, because you're definitely not alone, especially when you have impact coming from the outside into the organization. We're going to talk about setting the stage. We're going to talk about strategic prioritization, what to consider, what kind of mind shifts we should have and take into consideration as we're looking at resource constraints, and why negotiating and communicating boundaries is part of that mind shift. We'll talk a little bit about stress management and a little bit about the neuroscience, and then we'll close out with the Q&A, and then share some resources that we've put together for you. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and dive right into it. Here we go. So today, just remember, today's about reframing, shifting your mindset, and really getting a feel for what it's like to navigate when you're dealing with these types of constraints in the workforce. Feel free to interact. Feel free to ask questions or share experiences in chat. It always adds color, and your experiences are knowledge. So go ahead and share them as we move through some of these areas of efficiency. So for starters, I wanted to share kind of where to start when we're looking at constraints, right? So we have to be very realistic. In today's workplace, managers are often tasked with achieving the unachievable, delivering results faster with fewer resources and under greater scrutiny than ever before. right? And that's happening because of the shifts, not only in workforce, but what management and leadership is evolving into, which is also shifting. So while it might not be said, that is what's happening. And so some of the constraints, some of the challenges we're experiencing are embedded in these areas. These impossible demands don't just strain budgets and schedules, they strain people. So a lot of what's coming from the outside world into our organizations is having a toll. Left unchecked, they lead to burnout, high turnover, poor decision making, and a decline in team morale. So the awareness for us is to be aware that there is a very direct correlation, a very direct relationship between these areas and how our teams are feeling. The problem isn't just the lack of resources. It's the gap between expectations and reality. And the reason why that is so, so critical for managers out there is because part of our function is to step into that and set expectations so they align with the resources, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's one of the areas that requires that kind of connection and mind shift to elevate our efficiency and also not kill ourselves doing it, because management is stressful, no doubt. So let's start with workforce dynamics. And again, I want to reiterate what I said at the very beginning of the intro. You are not alone. You are not alone. And there's more to this than just the individual contribution. There's more going on in the world. Okay. So we're going to start with some workforce dynamics that are probably right now creating some friction, creating some pressure, creating some stress, right? In the world. This is the world we're living in right now. So again, you are not alone, right? You're in good company, especially right now. Current fiscal constraints represent a growing squeeze on the workforce. So we have to include this in our understanding of how to manage this well. Rising national debt, interest burdens, structural spending pressures, budget policy friction, and state level strain. So I can tell you from my experience this year, I'm feeling the pressure across different clients. They have budget cuts, they have high turnover. There's a lot of different things happening, right? And the managers caught within it are left to manage the stress and the pressure that everybody's feeling throughout an organization. So let's be real, as we're setting this mindset and being more efficient and more effective, that there's more to it. There's more to it. So why is this important? As we're looking at how to be better tacticians, more effective leaders, it's important because we can't deny what's actually happening and what's outside of our control and what's within our control. That's why it's important. So the combination of a cooling labor market and budgetary pressure creates a challenging backdrop for organizations. And that's across industries. So we just have to be real that that is a thing and that it's creating a sort of climate, right? Managers face constrained resources while workers confront uncertain job prospects and flatlining wages, right? So the pressure that our teams feel, that is pressure that makes managers' job tougher, right? And so we can't deny that it's there. It is there. Understanding these dynamics is essential for designing strategies that balance performance goals and are able to create sustainability and heighten morale, right? So all these things are connected. So here's something to consider, right? When we're looking at a case study and we're looking at signs of fragility, and this is important because part of what makes a manager, a leader masterful is them widening their lens about the environment. And so here's some things for you to consider. And these are things that we have sources for, which we will share with you so you could study them or research them if you're curious later, and think about how it impacts you in your specific industry, in your organization, or even in your role or function as a manager. So unemployment is edging up. So the jobless rate hovers around 4.2%, showing little change, but an uptick from its recent lows. So again, when you have people who are experiencing stress, it's important to have kind of a gauge. Growing unemployment claims. Almost 2 million Americans currently receive benefits, the highest level since 2021, indicating prolonged joblessness for many. So households are strained. That people take to work with them. Those stresses, they end up on your team, in your workflow, in your operating environment. Labor force participation is slipping. So because this is the state that we're in, you see engagement be more difficult. You see motivation be impacted. And as managers, we have to just be real that that's a thing and that it's happening. And that could be a resource constraint as well within our human resource, right? The proportion of work age individuals in the labor force has declined slightly, contributing to tighter labor market dynamics. Uneven consumer demand. So spending is buoying. It's shifting back and forth between high earners and while middle and lower income groups struggle. So that impacts a large scale of the teams that we manage. So these are things that create fragility in how we're working, but also in how we're managing. So here's a reference table for you. I won't read it through, but you'll have it in the deck that's provided to you in case you want to look into what we just shared. So now let's get into the tactics. Let's get into what actually is going to make a physical difference for you as managers. Setting the stage is super important. Getting ready for that mind shift, right? So as we prepare to manage these constraints better, the reality of all of this is that it's impossible to manage everything and to meet every goal that's given or handed to us, right? We have to know how to discern. So unrealistic expectations take place with managers all the time in the workforce. Leaders and managers don't take the time to make the distinction between stretch goals and burnout traps, right? So the first key takeaway, and one of the tools that you're going to be gifted today is a tool that's going to help you distinguish between what a stretch goal is and what a burnout trap is. Because sometimes we blur the line and we take on way more than we should. So handling goals with limited resources requires training and development around what is non-negotiable and what is negotiable in management roles, right? So first you have to have some sort of way of identifying, is this something I should take on, or is this something that I need to push back on a little bit and renegotiate, right? So that's one of the mind shifts is, do you see when you're assigned a goal with limited resources, do you currently see it as an opportunity to negotiate, right? And that's a yes or no question that you can answer for yourself. But here we go, right? So why does this happen? Let's dig in. Why do we get lofty goals with limited resources? And why do we carry them? Why do we try to do it all, right? So let's explore. So why unrealistic expectations happen in organizations? Here's why they happen, and they happen very commonly. Lack of resource awareness. Leaders may not see the actual time, budget, or staffing constraints that managers face. And sometimes I can tell you, I've been in executive roles, I've led teams. Sometimes there's an impression that because you're in that role, you see everything. That's a false narrative. I rely on my managers to be my eyes and ears, right? And so I try to create an environment in where that is brought to the forefront and they have a voice, but that's not always the case across every organization. So just be aware that that is an opportunity. It could be a gap, right? A blind spot. Top-down pressure. Organizational goals are set without adequate input from operational teams. So sometimes we're just not seeing what the right hand is doing or the left hand, right? And we're not bringing it together. We're not creating alignment. Optimism bias. Leaders and teams overestimate capacity and underestimate challenges. So we take on this kind of optimism of I can do it all, right? And that should really not be the case. It should be, let me vet this and see what's actually a legitimate, realistic goal and what's a burnout trap, right? Like that should be our thinking. Reactive decision making, rapid shifts in priorities without adjusting resources. So sometimes the goal just shifts, but the resources don't, right? So that should be a red flag for us to wait, let's take a look at that. Let's see if the goal is aligned with the resources before we move into full execution mode. And last, but definitely not least, cultural norms. So if in your environment you have this always deliver no matter what mindset, you're not going to take a look at making that distinction. because it's push, 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 right? And I think that those are some of the things that we get stuck on. And it makes it difficult for us to move away from that culture, right? And so even if the cost is unsustainable, we don't take a time to pause and distinguish between a realistic goal and a burnout trap. Okay, so I'm going to continue to give you some tactics guides here to look at. So here's something to consider when you're thinking about whether something that's been assigned to you as a manager, as somebody who's leading in the environment, is it a stretch goal or a burnout trap, right? So stretch goals are going to be ambitious, but they're going to be realistic. And stretch goals are going to be supported by additional resources and adjusted timelines, right? So it's going to align. You're going to have something that's designed to encourage innovation and growth. That's a stretch goal. That's a goal that's actually helping you elevate and reach further faster versus a burnout trap. Now, if we're looking at a burnout trap, there's an unattainable aspect of it with the resources that you have. So in essence, we're setting ourselves and others up to fail when we don't take the time to distinguish between a stretch goal and a burnout trap and have that conversation with our leaders, right? There's a lack of clarity or the target consistently shifts. If the target for an objective or a goal is constantly shifting, I can tell you right now, it's a burnout trap. And you need to stop, reassess, and realign before you continue with execution. Otherwise, we're just continuing to wind each other up with no actual effectiveness or impact taking place. And last, but certainly not least, rewarding overwork instead of sustainable performance. So we create that trap as managers and as leaders when we reward things like staying late but have no idea what the impact of that day was, right? That's a very common example that I see all the time. Somebody who's available all the time, but we're not actually looking at their performance. We're just looking the volume or the duration that they're spending on the business, not the impact they're making on the business. And so that is why it's considered a trap, is because it can feel and look like we're doing something productive, but we're not actually doing something that's going to move the needle. So here is something that I think is so critical. And when I was a young manager, I really wished I would have been taught this: identifying what's non-negotiable versus negotiables in your role. As a leader or a manager who cares, we sometimes fall into the trap of thinking that we don't have any room for negotiation when we're handed a goal, that we don't have any room for negotiation when we're assigned resources, right? And that's a trap. That's a trap. That's not the case. You always can negotiate. Negotiating is not you being difficult, it's you being effective within your function. It's also asserting yourself in the appropriate way, right? And of course, you want to be professional, respectful, and form your argument. But you have to know that this is a thing, right? And I didn't know this till much later in my career because, I wanted to be a good manager who contributed. And so I would run with things. And so I learned, right, that there was a difference between running with it, trying to carry the burden, and being effective and impactful and actually furthering the business or the team, right? There's a difference. So non-negotiables look like this. Non-negotiables are key deliverables with fixed deadlines, legal, compliance, or safety requirements, right? That comes from a higher level requirement for the business. It's not up to you, right? Core responsibilities tied to organizational success, right? So if it's aligned with larger objectives and it's very clearly aligned and it's a must happen, right? Not a like to happen, then non-negotiable, right? Non-negotiable. But if it's negotiable, it looks like this. It's processes or formats that are open to modification without harming the results. It's tasks that can be delayed, delegated, or simplified. It's a nice to have projects or enhancements. So all of those things are negotiable. So I think it's important for us as managers and as leader to know where we have some actual negotiation opportunity. So let me know in chat because I'd love to hear from you. Do you often think of negotiable versus non-negotiable when you're handed goals and assigned resources? And you could just say yes or no unless you want to elaborate, but I'd love to hear from you in chat if this is an area of opportunity or not. I'll give you guys a few seconds. Don't be shy, just say yes or no in chat to let me know if this is something that comes up for you.
The chat is disabled.
It's disabled for you? Oh, thank you. Thank you for letting me know. It looks like it's not disabled for some. That's weird. Okay, it looks one participant answered. It looks it says disabled on your end, Lombard. Let me see here. Let me see here. Okay, try it now just to test. Go ahead and see if you can answer. No, it doesn't look
Not
like it's
yet.
not yet. Okay,
No,
let me see
no.
here. That's weird. It's like it's allowing some but not others, I guess. I'm not sure what it looks like. Okay, let me test this really quick and then we'll move on. I won't carry on too much, but I'll continue on. And we have in chat a question that says, can you dive in on how we can prioritize non-negotiables with teammates? So yes, so our participant Allie is ahead of the game. We're going to talk a little bit about prioritization because that is part of what you need to consider when we're talking about the mind shift. So I'll get there, Allie. I'll get there. Mind shift is our focus today, right? And is recognizing these areas is first. And then we look at prioritization, right? So making the distinction, and then we move into being strategic. Per usual, Allie's ahead of the game and she's on the strategic mode. So here we go. Let's get into it. So that was the mind shift. Now we have to reframe our expectations. And that's where prioritization comes in. Okay, so continue to chat, continue to ask questions if you can. I'll figure out what's going on with chat for our next session. So I apologize if you can't access it, but feel free to email me if you have any questions too after this session. I'm happy to answer any questions. So cognitive reframing for managers. So when we're looking at prioritization, first we have to reframe how our mind is thinking of things, okay? So here's how you start doing that. The shift perspective, that happens when you view challenges as opportunities to problem solve, not as dead ends. It's focusing on what's controllable. So sometimes, I don't know about you, but I know that this is true of me. The things that I can't control, I do stress about. I have to check myself and shift away from that, right? And that's my natural response. And so I have to discipline that area. The direct energy towards actions you can influence, right? It's redirecting your focus. Language matters. And this is again a matter of practice and discipline, but you want to replace the we can't with here's what we can do and focus on what you can do instead of complaining about what you can't. With managers, they fall into that trap because they feel like they've been handed resources for a goal that isn't realistic. Okay, so we'll continue to align those areas. You want to detach facts from feelings. Separate the situation from emotional reactions to see options clearly. Challenge assumptions. Ask, is this truly impossible or is there another way? Seek multiple angles. Involve your team in brainstorming alternative solutions when the resources do not align with the goals, right? Anchor in the bigger picture. Connect decisions back to organizational goals and long-term value, right? And that is after you've looked at the non-negotiable and the negotiable, right? So then you start to shift and then you start to include your team, right? So from blockers to levers, turning limitations into creative solution. So here we go. We're stepping into prioritization, okay? Which means that now we're moving from mind shift to tactics to strategy, okay? Did you have anything you wanted to share? Longbird, I saw you unmute. No? Okay, keep going. All right. Okay, so reframing the overload. That's prioritizing the opportunity, right? Making the opportunity the forefront. That's identifying top impact tasks and parking the rest. Literally out of sight, out of mind, focusing on what the opportunity is, right? Not the challenge, what the opportunity is. Reframing, we're short staffed, right? A lot of the time, the resource constraint for managers is largely around staffing. That's really common across industries, more so in some industries than others. So cross training moments, right? Identifying those as resource constraints are happening, literally make a list, right? Like that's you optimizing that moment, focusing on the opportunity. Develop team versatility and resilience. Reframe deadline is impossible to scope negotiation, right? This is where it becomes strategic and an opportunity for you. If the deadline is impossible to meet, go into negotiation mode, right? Adjust deliverables to match available resources. Make sure you're aligning the goal with the available resources so you're able to clearly articulate that lack of alignment. Reframe this change is a disruption to this is a pivot point. We need to pivot here. Here's why, right? Find new efficiencies or strategies and reframe they said no to they gave me parameters, right? Such a killer move to do that. I can tell you that as I moved up the ladder, it's these types of reframes that put me in executive leadership because I stopped being stuck and being put in a box because that's all that I could do, right? I expanded beyond it. They gave me parameters, forces everybody around you to align with the goal and the resources, but also leadership, right? It also shows leadership and that you're aware of the strategic opportunity there. So work creatively within the set boundaries. Okay, so here we go to taking a deeper dive. So here are some of the key things that you want to remember. Okay. You control the frame, not the circumstance. You prioritize for impact, not volume. Boundaries are a leadership skill. Okay. So these are all part of that mind shift, right? That reshaping how we think about resource constraints. Because as soon as we hear resource constraint, we go through that moment of, here we go, right? We have the headache before the headache manifests, right? Just thinking about it stresses us out. And it does the same for our team. Language shapes perception. The things that you say are incredibly powerful to yourself and to others, right? And sanity is a strategic asset. So you have to prioritize it because your sanity is incredibly essential to you being strategic. If you're feeling like you're going crazy, you are not going to be as impactful when it comes to being strategic. Okay. Okay. So this is our very first session. We're going to have 5 sessions in the next weeks, and we're going to dive and layer into everything we touched on today. So you'll get more of a focus on prioritization, and we'll break that out. We'll get more of a focus on the tactics and how to be strategic. Let me know in chat if you have any other questions or anything that you'd like to share about any experiences that you've had around resource constraints. I'll give you a few seconds before I move on. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on because I think we're good and I think we're good on our YouTube stream. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going, but feel free to interrupt me if you have anything you'd like to share. So part of the activity today is going to include you having a goal setting checkpoint tool. Okay, this tool you can use against any goal that you have, anything that you've been issued or assigned, and you can use it to audit whether it's an actual stretch goal or a burnout trap. So that's your tool for this week. And every week we're going to have a tool for you that's aligned with what we talked about. Okay. So this tool will be emailed to you today, and you could literally start playing with some of your goals right now. And the reason why this is important is for a couple of reasons. You as a manager recognizing whether you're being given a goal that's going to help you grow, help you further an organizational goal, help you identify how you can support your team to do better. that is a goal worth investing time and energy in. Okay, so that's one. And your time is just as valuable as anybody else's. I've always felt that way. Managers have a tough job. Okay. If it's a burnout trap, it's doing the opposite. So that's why it's important. If the goal you've been assigned is not furthering an organizational goal, it's not helping the team get better or grow, it's not addressing a specific problem, right? If it's not clear, you're just wasting your time and energy and taking orders, and you're better than that. I promise you that you're better than that. The managers that I've worked with, I've had the joy of seeing them grow into amazing leaders. And it's something that I really enjoy doing is seeing people just grow and be the best version of themselves in management and leadership. This is just one tool that could help you really get a gauge for it. And here's the thing. If you find that most of the goals that you have right now are burnout traps, have that conversation with your leader during your one-on-ones or request a meeting and say, hey, I just learned how to do this. And I was curious about these things. I identified that 3 out of my 7 goals were not necessarily stretch goals. And I feel a little bit like they're burnout traps, and explain to them what they are if they've never heard of this, right? You can even share the recording, right? You're going to get access to the recording, a copy of the deck, and the tool, right? So go out there and really look at this with intention, because it'll make you happier, more efficient, more effective, and your team will probably be more appreciative of not just getting orders pushed on them, right? There'll be more meaning behind all of that. Okay, so that's the tool that you're getting. Give me a thumbs up if you can, if you have access to the emojis. If you like this tool, I'd love to know, or a heart or something that lets me know that this is a tool you think will be useful. If you can't do any of those things, please email me. I'd love the feedback, and let me know if it was useful, if it helped you. Okay, awesome. Yay. Okay, well, you guys made my day. You made my Monday. Thank you. Training and support resources. So just to let you know, you're going to get a copy of this recording, a copy of the webinar deck. You also will get links within the deck that have access to our training programs. We have a variety of
Yes,
offerings
actually
now.
helped me a lot. It made me to understand that.
Okay, let me mute here.
It made me
Hold on.
understand. Okay.
Let me I'm sorry. Did you have a question before I keep going? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So you have access to information on the management planner that was designed by me and other experts. And you have access to our neuroscience studies, which show that we're proven to work and that we're based in science, the approach that we take to things. You have access to a free consultation in case you want to talk to me or meet with me anytime. And we now have management membership programs that help individual managers, teams of managers, and executive leaders and managers at a really accessible and affordable monthly rate. And you get access to a ton of things. So anyway, check those out. That's a little bit about our offering. And as I mentioned, this was session 1. So the next session is session 2. It'll be on August 18th at 10 a.m. And what we're going to be talking about next is doing more with less, resourceful planning when tools and time are scarce. So you're going to get more tactics in session 2 and a different tool that's going to help you do this thing. Okay, so that's the next session. And with that, thank you so very much. I'll stay on a little bit in case anybody has questions. If you want to unmute, you can unmute if you want to share anything. But aside from that, I'll see you all next week, and feel free to share with anybody that you think this would help. Okay, all right. Take care, everyone. Bye. Bye. Have a great week. Have a great week.